This gochujang tofu is one of my favorite recipes, and if you have followed my channel, you know that I have a separate recipe. You can check it out here. That is in and of itself just a 30-minute recipe. The key to freezer prepping gochujang tofu, this might be my most favorite meal to freezer prep, because what it involves is grabbing some extra firm tofu and chucking it in the freezer. Because honestly, the sauce comes together in about 2 minutes. You just mix a bunch of things together, and then you grab your frozen tofu that's been thawed overnight, press out any additional water, chop it up into pieces, and suddenly you've got a crispy gochujang tofu that's going to be ready in another 20 minutes after. So let's get started. So if you are actually freezer prepping the full recipe combined, then I suggest you open your packet of extra firm tofu and dump out all the liquid that's in there, and then get yourself a tofu press or just the heaviest cast iron skillet or book that is in your house. Great use of all those old textbooks that you've been saving but you're not doing anything with, because you want to get as much of the moisture out of the tofu as possible in order for it to absorb the flavors and crisp up as it's being cooked later. I have already started to do that, but you only need about 5 or 6 minutes of pressing. The longer you can press, the better. So if you are meal prepping a whole bunch of recipes, then I suggest you do what I've done, which is to start out by laying out the tofu to be pressed and then use it a little bit later towards the end of your meal prep time. And I have all of this detailed in my Prep in 10, Cook in 30 guide. If you want to get that, that's in the description below. So we have this already prepped. Look at that. That is a ton of water. So you want to just get all of that. I'm using 2 blocks of extra firm tofu. And then I am just going to cube this. I do 1, 2, 3, and 4 parts. And I'm going to try my best to slice this in half. This is not always a success, so don't hold yourself to that standard. Life is too short. Okay, same thing here. 1, 2, and 3. Great, so now the tofu is ready. And I'm going to start out by actually assembling the sauce first, because you want it to be at the bottom and you can get as much of the tofu mixed in as possible. It is one extra step, but I actually recommend for this particular recipe that you make the sauce in a separate container, like a Pyrex measuring jar or something, and then pour it in, because gochujang is extremely sticky. So if you're gonna add it to the bottom of the bag, it's just gonna stick to the bottom of the bag. You're not gonna get an even dispersion across the rest of the recipe. I am grabbing a 2-cup bowl over here, and let's get going. I'm gonna need about 3 tablespoons of gochujang. You can use as much of 1/4 of a cup or even 1/3 of a cup. Gochujang is not super spicy, but it is pretty high in sodium, so I try to regulate how much of that I am actually using. But it is totally up to you how you want to flavor this. There are 2 full chunks of tofu, so I think it will actually be just fine, even if you use more than this. And if you notice that the recipe is a little bit different than my regular gochujang tofu, it's because I'm actually doubling it and I'm making it freezer ready, but the regular recipe is excellent as it stands as well. Okay, and then to this I'm gonna add about 2 or 3 tablespoons of low sodium soy sauce. Again, low sodium is important because gochujang already has a ton of salt in it, so we don't want to overdo this. We're gonna do a tablespoon or 2 actually of rice wine vinegar, and then a teaspoon of toasted sesame oil. A little goes the wrong way here, so you don't need to really overdo this. A tablespoon of garlic powder, measure with your heart, and a tiny bit of maple syrup. Yes, I used a different maple syrup because the other one was super hard to open for whatever reason. You don't need a ton, just a little splash to kind of balance the flavors. I do not recommend using honey here, just maple syrup, because it can sometimes be finicky while freezing. Then you're just gonna quickly grab a whisk and get this whisked well together. You'll notice that the gochujang is no longer clumpy and a paste, but it's become a nice sauce. You get a really nice consistency over here. Okay, then you're gonna add the tofu to my prepped bag, and then just make sure you get all of this off. Actually, I like saving a few cubes of tofu on the side because we're gonna make sure that we get every last bit of that delicious sauce off of this mug. So just go ahead, pour it all in as best as you can, and then toss these guys in here. You want to grab a silicone spatula to be gentle with the tofu, and that's that. Look at that. And just give it a quick toss. Don't manhandle the tofu because they can break pretty easily, and you're gonna freeze them flat so they will get all mixed in over time. Okay. And the gochujang tofu is ready. You can add a bit of cornstarch or arrowroot starch or a similar starch here if you want it to coat and become crispy. I usually add that right after I pop this on the baking sheet, and then I just give it a good toss because I find that it crisps up better that way. But if you want to save that step, you can add it in here. Make sure that you're getting all of the extra air out, and we're done. Okay, we are gonna be making my gochujang tofu, and I come bearing some cornstarch. So I'm not gonna make all of it. This has thawed already. I'm just gonna grab some of it. Well, the only baking dish I have left today, because we've been baking all day, and only take me a few years, don't worry. I feel like that is sufficient for me for a meal, and I will be eating this with some noodles, and I will pop this right back in. And now the magic. I will be adding a little bit of cornstarch. About a teaspoon or two should be sufficient. Just make sure that you toss it as best as possible in the cornstarch before it goes in the oven, because this will help the tofu crisp up in a way that you would probably never have thought of. And then I like spreading it out so that it's getting enough exposure. See, it's all nice and spaced out. And then I'm gonna pop this in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, it's ready. Let's do it. Wow. Just look at how crispy that tofu is. Seriously, I know I should be waiting for it to cool down, but can you hear how crispy that is? Oh my goodness. That is so good. I'm gonna let this cool down, and I'm gonna make myself a bowl with it. Just look at how crispy that is. 10 on 10.